For more resources, visit rymonline.org.
The Local Youth Worker is a daily podcast that's centered on 5 questions each week. Ranging from the practical to the professional, we're looking for answers to the questions you're asking. Whether you're in full-time, part-time, or even volunteer youth ministry, this podcast is for you.
Hey everybody, we are back with Katie, talking to her all this week, and Katie, we're in the middle of the week, and we always think, it's hump day, people need some encouragement. So the question today is, what's a truth or several truths that give you perspective and encouragement in ministry? Without a doubt, those who have been in ministry for any length of time know they can be discouraging at times. So we definitely need encouragement, and we definitely want to point people to the Word for encouragement. So what's something you've got for us?
Oh boy, no pressure, right?
Yeah, you better encourage us. It's up to you.
Oh, I'm supposed to encourage you. I guess maybe I misunderstood the question, so hopefully something I'm going to say is going to be helpful. The two big, I guess, truths are things that I had to get over or realize in my ministry. The first one dealt with numbers. And I know I've heard other people talk about this. I go to a church of just under 200 members, so we do not have, it's a smaller church. Mm-hmm. So I often found myself being very discouraged by the numbers at youth groups or different events, especially when I would hear about other churches in the area that were drawing all of these kids. And, I started to kind of look at myself and be like, okay, what am I doing wrong? What should I be doing, to fix that? And through reading a couple of books and several conversations with my pastor, it finally started to sink in that it's not like numbers, sheer numbers at an event is not what matters. I've become more focused on doing everything I can to make sure that whenever the kids are with me, no matter how many that is, they're hearing the gospel and they're growing in their walk with the Lord. And, whether that's 10 kids or that's 100 kids, I'd rather have 10 kids who are here and they are actively engaged in the Word and trying to learn and apply biblical truths to their lives and growing closer to Christ than having 200 kids that, are maybe only here to socialize or because their parents want them to, mm-hmm. or whatever else the reason might be. So keeping, I guess, a gospel-centered focus has been super helpful instead of focusing on, okay, I got to get more numbers here, I got to get more kids here. It's, okay, with the kids that are here, what am I teaching them? Mm-hmm. And making sure that I'm doing everything in my power to take those kids that God has entrusted to me to disciple them the best way that I can.
Yeah, that's such an important truth to bring up. And that's something, the whole numbers mindset is something that I'm sure plagues everyone in ministry from time to time. I can remember so many times I would judge, the success of an event or a study based on how many people showed up. And there could be times where, hey, a lot of people showed up and I felt encouraged and thought things were great. And then, would even stop and think, okay, is the only reason it was great because a lot of people showed up? Right. And it can be so hard for sure.
Yep. Well, and especially because, I've gone to session meetings and stuff. And, one of the questions I get all the time is, well, how many kids do you have coming? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I might only have, at my high school group, I might only have 6 or 7 kids here. But those 6 or 7 kids are very engaged in the scripture. They're asking questions. They're involved in the discussion. So there may not be 60 kids here, but those kids that are here are hearing the gospel, mm-hmm. and they're engaged in discussion and they're growing in their faith, which is, I think, way more valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's a good truth to focus on, just to again, get our eyes off of the numbers,
Right.
and know that's not, that doesn't equate, success in
Right.
ministry or anything like that. So that's an important truth to cling to for sure.
The other one that I came up with as I was kind of reflecting on this question, I often find myself getting frustrated with the priorities of some of my families. I love the people at this church. I love them dearly, but sometimes their priorities are not aligned the way I would like them to be. Um, while I'm definitely not against kids being involved in sports, in band or choir, in clubs, in any of those things, I think those are all great things that God gives us as opportunities to glorify Him. However, I am against those things being a priority over your child's spiritual well-being. When parents are okay with a child missing church every Sunday or youth group every Wednesday for months at a time because of a sport, I get a little irritated, to say the least. Because I think part of it is just because that's not something I have control over. That's not something I can fix, because obviously I can't tell a parent what to do. But again, I've had several conversations with my pastor, and he always is able to kind of redirect my thinking and get me back on track. So through conversations with him and even with other youth workers, I'm beginning to kind of just accept the fact that sometimes parents are not as equipped as to disciple their children, I guess, as I expected them to be, which obviously was probably an unfair expectation on my part. I don't know how many of them have seriously thought about, the long-term effects that their decisions are having on their children, or that the example that they're setting by allowing their kids to do this is not a good one. We wonder why kids leave high school and don't come to church anymore. I mean, obviously there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them I think is, well, they've been shown and taught their whole life that, oh, well, if I have something going on a Sunday, like a basketball game or whatever, well, it's okay. I just don't have to go to church. Well, when that's been ingrained in them for years and years, it's not all that surprising. The tough part is I'm not a parent myself, so I know there's way more that goes into it than that, and I don't want to pretend for a second that I know how hard it is to be a parent, especially in the world that we live in, because I can't even imagine. However, I've been trying to do more. What I've been trying to do now that I'm, I guess, kind of just accepting this, is I'm trying to provide more resources for my parents to say, hey, these are some opportunities, whether it's through attending a conference or a webcast or books or anything I can get into their hands, where they can hear biblical truths about parenting from someone who has actually experienced doing that, because obviously I'm not that person. I'm not going to sit there and tell them this is how you should be a Christian parent when I have not lived that. So I have to be okay at this point with just, here are the resources, and then just kind of turning it over to God, and He will work how He will work, because getting frustrated about it only makes it worse. Because then I, get irritated with the parents, and then, the last thing I want to do is take it out on a kid, because it's not always their fault. So as frustrating as it can be at times, it is encouraging to know, though, that some of my kids, even at the middle school age, are already starting to get it. I've had conversations with several of them who have been guilty of the not being around for a while. And they've come up to me and say, Katie, I don't know if I want to play this anymore, or I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because I hate not being in youth group every Wednesday. So that is definitely an encouragement where the kids, I think, are getting it. So that, I guess, is a positive for sure. But just, I guess, kind of taking a step back and learning to control what I can control and letting go of the rest.
Yeah, no, That's a huge point you're bringing up, for sure. And like you just said right there at the end, learning to control what you can control. Because I would think, again, every youth worker is going to be nodding their head about the priorities and the busyness of the culture. And like you said, all of those things you listed are great things, good things the Lord can use to, grow these youth. But when you think about, the eternal perspective on, okay, what you're kind of forfeiting for what you're pursuing, there's really no comparison.
Right.
So, I mean, there's definitely an aspect of what you're saying where your frustration is justified and it's right because okay, these kids need to be in church and these kids need to be hearing the gospel. So when they're not, I think that's a good thing to be upset about. But then at the end of the day, knowing, okay, this isn't, it's not my place to make the decisions. And, and like you said, I think the humility of being a parent is extremely hard.
Oh, absolutely.
And knowing, well, we don't have it all figured out either. I think that's some good perspective.
Well, and I've had, since I would say in the last several months, I've had the chance to have some really good conversation with parents around this topic. And it's amazing to me how much goes on that I don't necessarily know about, which I think also has changed my perspective a little bit in that while it is super frustrating and I wish sometimes things were a little bit different, I also have to understand that sometimes the parents, are just as frustrated themselves. And like I said, I'm not going to pretend to act like I know what it's like to be a parent. And, it's a job that is so difficult, especially in the world that we live in. So, it's just a matter of, like I said, letting go of the things that I can't control and just doing my best to be a resource wherever I can.
Definitely. Yeah, those are two very helpful things to reflect on. So thanks for sharing that, Katie.